hear about those maternal mental health statistics and that they paint a pretty bleak picture of maternal mental health here in New Zealand, don't they? Were you surprised, Annabelle?
Oh, I was really surprised. It's heartbreaking to think that there's so many wahine out there who, during what should be the most tapu, precious time in their lives, feel that the only choice they have is to commit suicide. And I think it's just a sad indictment on the lack of investment we put into women's health and the well-being of our tamariki.
It's deeply shocking, isn't it, Ben, you know, that we are in the year 2022 and we have these really bleak statistics around maternity and perinatal period.
We have these bleak statistics across the board in mental health. It's been an intractable problem. We've seen, even with that $1.9 billion allocated, you know, in the so-called wellbeing budget, that there have been problems getting it off the ground. Mental health has a particularly acute mental health. You know, people really at the sharp end of their struggles, you know, are still probably underrepresented in terms of the services that are available. We've spent a lot of time as a country talking about how you should ask for help, you should talk to people. We haven't put in place the infrastructure for people to actually get the help they need, particularly at the sharp end of a crisis.
Do you think the health reforms will help in this area?
Well, I mean, what's behind the health reforms is the idea that first you'll get a consistent level of care across the country, and second of all, that you know, there will be more of a focus on primary health care, ideally nipping these problems in the bud. You know, and you would hope that, you know, if there's provision for maternal mental health care in there, that you're checking in on expectant and new mothers, that you're making sure things don't elevate up to that level of a crisis. Look, we can be optimistic. I'm sure the government would say that this will help, but we'll have to wait and see.
I hope there. It's not like totally confident, is it? Annabelle, why do you think it's been neglected for so long?
Well, I think probably for the same reason that period underwear and menstrual cups have only been invented in the last decade. Like there's just a lack of interest when it comes to women's health, and obviously tamariki don't have a platform to go and yell at politicians from. So I think that those are two of the big reasons. I think too, you know, I really want to mihi to our midwives for the mahi they do, because they are the first port of call for women during their pregnancy, and I think they need to be given a lot more support and a lot more resourcing, because they're the ones that are seeing firsthand, they're the ones that are going into the homes, and they can really make a huge difference in outcomes for our tamariki and for mums if they're given the right support.
And connect with those families, because I suppose what we're also seeing here is that mental illness or mental distress around pregnancy can be intergenerational. You know, the effects are profound and they are imprinted quickly on those babies, aren't they?
They are, and you know, I think we have some incredible mental health advocates in this country, and it's no wonder people like Mike King are becoming so frustrated. But as Ben says, when people are in crisis, there's very few services that you can reach out to, and that does have an intergenerational impact on our families.
I want to switch now to talking about Three Waters. We would have seen the interview with the Minister earlier. In terms of its political management, this process, how would you rate it, Annabelle?
Well, I think it's a difficult process to manage. We have a huge issue, one that should really transcend party politics, but everybody needs to drink water. The people in charge of it have done a horrendous job. The government has to consult and talk to the people that have done a horrendous job, while also balancing the interests of iwi and sell it to the public who are undereducated about how poor the state of our water resources are. So have they done a wonderful job? No. Could they have done it a lot worse? I think so. And is this an option that's worth considering? I think it is.
Do you think that they've solved the problem? You know, the Minister has acknowledged there was communication issues. Perhaps this has been a rocky process for the government. But do you think that announcement yesterday, taking on the working group's recommendations, is that going to fix it?
Well, I think in terms of the privatisation, ensuring that the resources can't be privatised in the future will go some way to alleviating concerns of the public, but the primary issue is that councils don't like to be told by central government what to do. You can kind of understand that. I think it's, you know, understandable that there's concerns about how huge these areas are and what that means at a local level, and any time you take the decision-making power away from communities, that's going to be a concern. So
the government really, I suppose what you're saying on one hand is that the government really had no choice but to push this through. There was always going to be resistance when you're centralising things like this, and it's a matter of sort of forcing it through.
Yeah, I think, well, no one's going to welcome it with open arms, and there's not a lot of alternative views being proposed by the opposition. So it seems to be the only thing that's on the table. I mean, personally, I'm shocked by how many New Zealanders would rather wade through tūtai on their way to work or drink water with sheep tūtai in it than share a little bit of power with Māori in a co-governance arrangement or work through a new proposal like this.
I want to talk a little bit now about the other big story that's been happening out there this week, which is the ram raids and youth crime and youth justice. What have you made of this week's stories about youth and they're out there and doing ram raids and robberies, Ben?
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, the national government, the national opposition rather, you know, definitely portraying this as sort of breakdown of society, you know, lack of law and order, soft on crime by the government. The government sort of trying to put it down to a TikTok phenomenon, saying this is just kids acting up, you know, doing videos like they used to when Jackass was big, you know, 20 years ago. And look, the truth is probably about halfway in between, which is that we've heard a lot about social cohesion in the last couple of years in the wake of the Christchurch terror attack, and that's been mainly focused on sort of extremist beliefs. But actually there's a lot of ways that you can kind of fall off the margins of society. And one of them is, you know, these almost sort of Les Mis sort of gangs of dissolute youths who, you know, don't feel like they have a particular investment in society as it stands, don't see any particular problem with, you know, ramming into what seem to be extremely insecure shopping malls, and you know, and taking whatever they want from Noel Leemings, and you know, that only seems to be sort of half of the fun. You know, half of it seems to be about the experience of it, and so you do have to look at, you know, these wider things. You know, what you know, and you can compare it to the gang situation. Yeah. What else do these kids have to look forward to apart from, you know, taking some Instagram photos with a cool bike or posting TikTok videos of themselves smashing up Noel Leemings? You know, you've got to give people something to, you know, to aspire to. Yeah. They're never going to buy a house because they can't get, you know, they can't get 200 grand off the bank of mum and dad. So, you know, what other pathways are there in this society?
I mean, we have a cohort of rangatahi that have just spent basically 2 years of their young lives in lockdown, often with financially stressed parents who are having to go cap in hand to food banks to get a kai to put on the table for them. They're exposed to all of this crazy stuff on social media, but by and large, youth crime has been down. This is just a blip, and I think that it's important that we don't overblow it into some huge phenomenon. I think that, you know, it's not great. It's kids that clearly need a bit more wraparound support for them and their whānau, but I don't think it's this huge crime wave on the same scale as what we're seeing with the gangs in New Zealand.
It is a warning for us, though, isn't it? That there is, you know, if you've got a 7-year-old out at 1 o'clock in the morning being part of a robbery, that is a warning that those communities and Ministry of Social Development or police, you know, that is a warning for those agencies.
Well, it's a warning for that whānau. Yes. I think it's important that we don't generalise it into this huge community issue. It's obviously a whānau who's got some dysfunctional stuff going on if their tamaiti is out doing that stuff at 7 years of age, but I think it's important that we don't overblow it into this huge community issue when actually there's plenty more rangatahi in our communities doing awesome mahi, staying home and doing their homework and making nice dancing videos on the TikTok.
And we need to connect those two groups perhaps a little more. Thank you so much for joining us, Annabelle and Ben, this morning. Well, after the break, Digi editor Finn Hogan joins us with his digital power